Hello and welcome to this webinar to launch the latest OPSI report on tackling policy challenges through public sector innovation. I'm Katja Reppel. I'm the Head of Unit for Democracy and European Values in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. And I have the pleasure to support the OPSI via the European Union's Research and Innovation Framework Program, Horizon Europe. And let me just note that this support isn't recent. Actually, in 2013, we had an expert group report on public sector innovation that requested EU investment in supporting governments' internal innovation efforts. And actually, one of the experts involved in drafting this report, Mr. Kattel, is present with us today. Based on that report, we established in 2015 a partnership with the OECD that was also looking into the question of public sector innovation in parallel to the expert group that we had been drawing up. In the last 7 years, a lot was achieved, and to name just a few of them, the OPSI platform was set up, showcasing different case studies, offering a toolkit navigator. The Declaration for Public Sector Innovation was adopted in 2019 with, by now, 43 signatories to it. An Mission Action Lab was set up. And let me also mention, besides these rather tangible achievements, the OPSI managed to open up the rather cautious government context to share experiences on public sector innovation. Very important, a network of national contact points was set up with practitioners from government administrations, and we were raising sensitive issues to challenge the status quo in this network. Notably, I would just like to mention that the relation between political leaders and the civil service, or the framework conditions to support innovation, are really not something easy to discuss. The most impactful result of the OPSI and the network for national contact points was, I think, to move from an initial list of nice-to-have actions like innovation weeks and trainings and prizes towards influencing the core business of government, so really influencing policymaking. Of course, this is a learning journey, and this learning journey includes also a journey inside the European Commission services, where we exchange knowledge and collaborate with various services, not only my Directorate General, also the Joint Research Centre, the Secretariat General, DG Reform, Connect, and the colleagues working on digital issues. The launch of the report is another milestone in making innovation efforts in governments strategic. And I have to say that a lot really remains to be done, even after 7 years of partnership with the OECD to run this. There are many challenges ahead for the public sector, where I believe innovation really is a must. And just to mention a couple of critical challenges that governments face, the so-called perma-crisis with multiple parallel crises, be it health, energy, climate, geopolitical dependencies, a crisis of the welfare state model, even war since the beginning of this year, and all that in a situation of rather tight-strapped public finances, inflation, and possible even recession ahead. The public demand for engagement, accountability, democratic governance, and deliberations is, however, on the rise, which is good, but it really addresses quite difficult to change issues for many public administrations. We need radical changes in working methods like flexibility, digitization, hybrid working methods. And the administrations have to work with citizens and the actors in the innovation system to actually better use these methods. We need new organizational framework conditions conducive to innovation and capacity building. And more than anything, we need a long-term strategic approach to bridge several political cycles. And here comes the point. If we focus on adaptation to new circumstances of governments as the main approach, we will be stuck in reactive modes and solutions will come too late, and governments are criticized for that. If we focus on incremental improvement in existing systems, we will not be able to address the underlying problems of the institutional setups and mechanics. To remind you just of one principle that came up in the European Commission's e-government work, the main principle there is that we shouldn't just digitize existing red tape, but cut the red tape. So we really need to go beyond just incremental improvements. We need, in fact, a step change. One approach to that is to design missions that engage all innovation ecosystem actors in game-changing common endeavors. The European Commission tried so with designing 5 missions under Horizon Europe, and we are practicing this mission-oriented innovation approach. I'd be happy if some of you take interest in the missions and see how is it going and get engaged in that. We need to take a future-oriented stance and anticipate what is coming up to build our strength to meet future challenges and develop a collective vision. Also, my Director General in the Commission is active in that, for instance, via foresight exercises. I would like to finish on that point and stress the European Commission highly values the partnership with the OECD and the commitment of governments to implement their commitments under the OECD Declaration for the Public Sector Innovation. And with that, I would like to hand over to Carlos, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katja, for your kind words, and also let me emphasize really the long-standing partnership and collaboration that there has been between the OECD and the European Commission around this agenda on public sector innovation. And I think the report that we'll be presenting today is also reflecting that long-standing collaboration in terms of the different approaches that governments can take to foster and enhance public sector innovation. So I think again, thanks for the kind words, Katja, and we really look forward to continue collaborating on this agenda. But also thank you to Korea, Sweden, and Austria that are also with us for sharing their experiences from the front line of public administrations in the world to work on the model of innovation facets that the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation of the OECD has put forward, and also some of the insights and advice that we will also get in this panel for advancing the topic of or the agenda of innovation in a portfolio manner and as managing portfolios. Let me just also pause and also acknowledge the tremendous and fantastic work of all the team of the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation that has been working on this agenda, and that is with us also, led by Direct, Angela, and Marco also, and also the numerous experts that have also shared their insights and their experience with the OECD and DET, that have included some of the systematic reviews on the different types of innovation facets that governments can take to accelerate that agenda. And I think the report that we will discuss today has a number of key messages that come across very strongly that we will share also in the panel. The first one really is that innovation is core to government. So it's core to government, and it's core to its ability to increase agility and responsiveness, to increase public value, to increase the quality of services to citizens, and at the end also to achieve better spending, especially in times of crisis. At the end of the day, I think the report has these strong messages that innovation in the public sector improves lives, and we have a lot of countries that are also experienced about how to improve life experiences with administrations. And I think I would just also recall that last week we had a ministerial meeting of the Public Governance Committee of the OECD that emphasized these messages about how innovation is core to restore trust in government and also in democracies, in the ability for governments to interact in a more agile way with citizens. The second, I think, message that also this report is bringing to us is that innovation in the public sector has been professionalizing in the last few years, and that many OECD countries have institutionalized the practice and concrete measures to support public sector innovation. There's this element that public sector innovation becomes really a professionalized field in many governments. Another message also is that the ability to innovate is also at the core of government effectiveness and stability, especially in turbulent times that we are facing nowadays in the context of complex and interrelated challenges. And Mario Nava, also the Director General for DG Reform of the EC, in last week's ministerial meeting of the OECD, has also emphasized this important element about innovation as core to government effectiveness and responsiveness to the citizens' expectations. Another message I think that the report also brings to us to reflect upon is that governments not only need to be more efficient in the way they work, but also develop more agility to adapt, more foresight to anticipate, and more ability to guide the missions that they want to fulfill, their main goals. And I think some of the facets of public sector innovation, such as mission-oriented innovation, is really about setting long-term transformational goals. But I think the report also emphasizes the thing that it's a challenge on how to keep those aims within organizations that are at the same time having multiple innovation initiatives that are sometimes going sequentially. So I think the portfolio approach that this report is pushing forward is quite interesting in that respect, thinking about innovation of a portfolio of initiatives that work together towards common goals. And it's quite important to go beyond single projects to manage the risks across public sector activities and generate synergies between the different activities. Somehow it reminds me of what we could call the approach of the portfolio approach of venture capital funds, also in terms of how you invest in risks. And somehow we could have this notion of venture government in that sense, exploring risk areas, but also innovation areas through different approaches. So I'm delighted to be with you and everybody listening to us online also to launch this report that I hope is the start of a conversation on all these topics that have been outlined above and in this report. So looking forward to the fruitful discussions and around this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katja and Carlos, both for the kind words. I'm going to give a quick overview about the report itself and all the work that researchers together at the OECD and beyond have done to actually put this work and report together. And then we're going to hear from the countries themselves and how they have actually used the information that I'm going to share. And later on, we'll hear from the experts on how to actually implement a portfolio approach. So what is the way forward? But without further ado, a little bit about the context of the report and why we did this work at OPSI. So OPSI, we tried to really uncover what is next and turn this into the new normal. So public sector actually has the opportunity to innovate. I personally, over the course of my 18 years of working on the field of innovation, I do not know one area, one single field or sector in the public sector that doesn't require innovation. And I'm going to also explain why all public sector fields need to innovate continuously and on a continuous basis as well. And OPSI, we're working on various topics and themes that support the work that I'm going to talk about, from anticipatory innovation, cross-border innovation, behavioral insights, innovation management. All of these approaches actually play a role in terms of tackling policy challenges through innovation and not getting stuck into hype cycles about the latest important thing, but actually looking at the need to innovate in a systematic manner and why public sector organizations need to do that. So this is really the work of the collaboration with the European Commission and more than 30 researchers and analysts from inside the OECD and beyond who have worked on this. So thank you all for your input and actually generating the systematic reviews into what public sector innovation actually means and is. So the work really covers the observatory's public sector innovation model, which comes from the fact that the innovation is needed not only to reach goals, but also adapt to different situations. So we need different types of innovation for different types of goals and challenges and public sector values that we need to implement. So public sector needs mission-oriented innovation because we are currently faced with new complex challenges that we need to actually fulfill. We need directionality. We need to say that these are the goals and purposes that the public sector actually needs to deliver on. We need to continuously also improve. We are entrusted with public money. We need to also, in the conditions of austerity, and deliver more with less. So we will need to continuously enhance our systems, even if we don't have specific challenges to tackle. We also need to have an adaptive position. We need to be agile in terms of the responding to citizens' needs and new types of situations. And we also need to have a future outlook in terms of anticipating future risks and opportunities. Just recently, talking with a country in terms of their risk preparedness system, we discussed really about the interdependencies between these different types of innovations. We need both challenges to tackle in terms of if we're facing an energy crisis, but at the same time, we also need to anticipate different types of crises that may be calling just behind the door. And we also need to have agility, not to stockpile different goods and products and services, because we don't know what is necessary tomorrow. So we might also need to have an adaptive arm, an agile arm of government, so we can respond quickly to new types of challenges and needs that we didn't see coming at all. So in this work, in this report itself, we did systematic reviews on all of these innovation facets. We looked at how they're applied currently in the public sector. Enhancement-oriented innovation really having really strong drivers within the public sector because of austerity and the works. And really one of the key questions in terms of enhancement as part of the portfolio itself is to how not to have it dominate continuously your innovation portfolio, how to actually balance it with other types of innovation that are needed, because we're continuously faced with austere conditions. We have to deliver more with less. And we have very strong drivers from auditing, evaluation, performance measurement in the public sector that drive this type of innovation in its entirety. We also need to have adaptive innovation that I also mentioned, that we need to have agility built into our organizations, that we have adaptive capacity, innovation approaches, and also frameworks for the organization itself to have the ability to experiment in a continuous basis. It is usually also very difficult to make room for that in public sector organizations, because you have to give license and actually time for public sector and civil servants to adapt and be able to respond and experiment in new ways. So you have organizational drivers for that organizations can apply in making resources available, building the right culture within organizations that support adaptation next to enhancement, which is totally different drivers in terms of how to make this happen. And as mentioned by Katja and others as well, mission-oriented innovation is a big part of public sector goals and innovation goals as well. We are facing very complex challenges, and having a mission-oriented approach really also says and gives a task for public sector leadership and also politicians to commit to challenges that are ambitious and targeted and time-bound, that they can actually instigate a new purpose-driven or systematic change of transformation. And we need that actually to happen to build models of change that we can structure and govern missions in a better way. So having institutional and entrepreneurship and funding models and different governance tools in place to do missions well. So we know already how to establish them, but the doing part is something that we need help with. And also anticipatory innovation, where OECD has a lot of work connected to this, but really using anticipatory innovation in terms of not only doing strategic foresight of futures, but using it as an input to make decisions about what type of opportunities we want to establish. So having also transformation units within our organizations that say these types of changes are very important to the field that I work in. These technological changes will change how I deliver the services or products at hand and will impact how I do my work. So we need to also start to explore, experiment, and create new evidence for decision-making in these type of new opportunities and risks for innovation purposes. And all of this is really leading to the argument of having a portfolio approach, because we have seen swings in public sector organization innovation portfolios for very directed approaches of funding only challenges, funding only mission-oriented innovation, or doing a lot of enhancement. But we really want to have a mix of those approaches, of those innovations, because that will also help you to avoid lock-in in your innovation practices and in your practices in general, because we want to have an innovation portfolio that covers most of those, or if not all of the innovation facets. You may have a very mission-oriented organization. You may be called to actually deal with healthcare or well-being, and you have missions connected to that. But you need other type of innovations to actually balance that out, to adapt to new types of needs, that you don't actually develop a kind of a blind spots in your own innovation portfolio. So innovation portfolios help to develop a distribution of responsibilities, coordinate also knowledge across those types of innovations, and tailor different projects for different types of risks that you want to manage. And really what is missing here is the practice of having actually a portfolio approach of looking at public sector innovation within public sector organizations, because this would help to avoid fragmentation between different projects. It will tackle the ever-cited risk aversion and failure that we are constantly hearing about in public sector organizations as well, and also build the ever-important synergies between actions, because that is extremely important in actually reaching, for example, missions as well. So we need to actually go beyond single projects and look at them as a portfolio together to see, are they contributing or not contributing the purposes that we want to see. So OECD has also developed different tools for portfolio approaches based on the innovation facets model, but also other approaches are available. So we have available for you to use online, free for everybody, on the OPSI website, the portfolio exploration tool, to actually look at what innovation projects you have and how they are kind of manifested and how your portfolio is balanced between different types of projects. You can use that also as a kind of a decision-making or clarity-making tool as well, to make your projects, programs, and processes visible in your own organizations using the portfolio mapper tool that we have developed. But further development is needed, and we are also doing tests in how to actually map innovation portfolios, how to use them as decision-making tools, looking at different risks, evidence, exploration, exploitation dimensions, and how to actually make that information usable in terms of making concrete strategic decisions about where innovation is needed most in public sector organizations. The report covers all of this, of course, in more detail, so I hope you have a good time reading it over the holidays by the fire next to the Christmas tree. Thank you all, and I hope that the country examples will give more clarity on terms of how portfolio approaches can be used in practice. All the best.
Thank you, Piret. So my name is Angela Hansen. I'm with the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation as well, and fortunate to be a big part of this work over the last 5 years in the observatory, and to really see it develop and to be tested in different country contexts. That's part of the most interesting bit of what the observatory does, in my opinion, is we come up with these frameworks based on our experience with countries, and then we test them with countries and learn from how these are applied and compare them across different contexts. So today we're going to hear from some examples of how countries have done exactly that, from informing policymaking to reshaping what happens inside administrations, to coordinating with ecosystems of actors to make innovation happen. So to help with that, we're going to be hearing from 3 different countries today. We're going to be first hearing from Korea, and then we're going to jump to Austria, and then finally to Sweden. So if I could invite Taejun Lee to come in and talk a little bit about the work that's been done in Korea.
Great to see you. My name is Taejun Lee from KDI in South Korea. So we are working closely with central ministry and the local government and their arm's length bodies in the public sector in charge of the public innovation and the government innovation. So actually, this report will be very helpful to Korean public sector managers and policymakers and even innovators. And also the civil society organizations involved and interested in the government innovation in Korea. Actually, the government innovation has been very important. The political support is very critical and crucial for the Korean government innovation agenda to be successful. So this literature and report will be used as a reference model and the theoretical and practical the guiding principle. So embedding so the multifaceted model addressed in this report will give us a very important vision statement for the Korean government innovation into the strategy that is linked and the support a high level of a public sector the reform. There's a multifaceted the innovation approach that can help us the making the sound integration and different views and interest, allowing governments to build a consensus, ensure ownership, and increase support for public sector innovation agenda in South Korea. And also this report and this approach can help us in inducing the involvement, the timely involvement and timely intervention of the civil society stakeholders as a strategic partners to make a greater synergies and a greater the challenges, the surrounding and the public sector innovation, and reinforcing the national agenda in the political arena and across levels of government and the society as a whole. I firmly believe that this approach can help us in the setting of a national vision that should be linked with the broader public sector strategy, the reform and innovation objectives to secure a commitment of a political leadership, promote interministerial coordination and collaboration, and facilitate engagement and coordination and relevant agencies across levels of the government. As you might know, the Korea Minister of the Interior and Safety, the Government Innovation Department has vital functions to the public sector innovation in South Korea. However, there are many cases where the senior civil servant and key decision makers and high-profile public managers lack of understanding and literacies about the terms and jargons and ideologies and concepts and models and the systems addressed in the 4 different kinds of innovation models. I think as a European perspective and a Western society perspective, that would be different from those of Korean, the government system and a political the system and even bureaucratic and mindset. Anyway, if an OECD expect this approach to be is more resonant and helpful and welcomed by the Korean and the public sector, this approach should be is translated and contextualized and when necessary re-engineered to empower and enable Korean governments to use this approach for policy making, service design, and strategic management. To this end, they're working with the Prime Minister's Office and Ministry of the Personnel Management and National Human Resources Development Institute and some think tanks and educational bodies serving public sector innovation. So will be very, very important and to disseminate the lessons and the leadership of this report, extending the strategic partners to academic societies and the media and the civil society organizations will be helpful to establish the firm foundation of this report in South Korea. Last but not least, basically mission-oriented innovation and anticipatory innovation very much important to current situation in South Korea, facing the government reform and innovation. So actually, the Korea, the use in mission-oriented innovation and anticipatory innovation, asking and the government and private sector and the civil society organizations to use data, digital technologies, and even social media and a platform to improve the government accountability, social inclusiveness, and the open government and digital government. And also Korean society and mission-oriented innovation and anticipatory innovation strength the ties between public sector and the private sector, extending the partnership of the civil society organizations, as I mentioned before, the developing clear business cases and experimental approaches and entrepreneurial approaches to sustain the funding and the success of the mission-oriented innovation and anticipatory innovation project at the national level and the local level have been very well supported by the central ministry and the R&D institutes. Enhancing a risk management approach to address the digital and social and economic security and privacy issues when conducting mission-oriented innovation and anticipatory innovation, very much important to the Korean society. And also central ministry and the regulatory bodies take a close look at how mission-oriented innovation and anticipatory innovation use data, employ the data science and data technologies and even behavior insight to make experimentation and to make a demonstration of these two the important the project. Anyway, the reinforcing institutional capacity to managing and monitor and the mission-oriented innovation and anticipatory innovation, the suggested and recommended by this report, as will be a very important and even sustaining the force and a mandate to Korean public sector innovation. So I firmly believe that even KDI and many public sector organizations expected this report to be influential and even meaningful to Korean participatory, collaborative, and even data-driven collaboration, data-driven partnership for making public sector reform and innovation. So thank you so much, the report and the publication.
Thank you very much for the perspective from Korea. Really happy to hear how it's been helpful for your work in promoting public sector innovation. And I remind the participants, if you have specific questions for any of our panelists today, to please add those to the Q&A. We may have some time for discussion afterward. With that, I'd like to hand over to Michael Kallinger from Austria to tell a bit about the work going on there. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Angela. Good morning, dear colleagues. Welcome from my side, and thanks for the opportunity to share my experience with the OECD Innovation Facets model from a practitioner's point of view. My name is Michael Kallinger, and I work in the Austrian Federal Ministry for the Civil Service as head of unit for public management and governance. Next slide, please. We have been following the development of the Facets model right from the beginning, and we have also supported the Horizon 2020 project. So in my view, there are several approaches to use the model. Firstly, to use it as an abstract model, so to speak, as background information about various innovation approaches. The model helps to discuss various aspects of a project. Do we have a mission we want to fulfill? Is the project sufficiently forward-looking? These considerations can be made for real projects, but also in the context of training. For example, I use the model in my courses at the University of Applied Sciences, Campus Wien. Next slide, please. Another important application is the mapping of projects or instruments. So in the Austrian administration, for example, we often use the quality management tool, CAF, the Common Assessment Framework, which is rather broadly used in European countries and beyond. The model is based on the plan, do, check, act cycle. So it is a step-by-step development of the organization. The model is used in Austria on the federal, province, and local level. You can see the CAF organizations in this map of Austria. Next slide. And we used the matrix of the different innovation styles also in a TSI project on CAF and resilience, together with the Commission, of course, and OECD. And also here the model was very helpful. Next slide. And in the model, I would locate the CAF as an example for enhancement-oriented innovation. As a second example, I can cite finance online. Taxpayers can carry out all important actions online on this portal in Austria. The portal has existed for around 20 years. Many improvements have been made over time. Recently, a bot was also integrated. For me, these two examples show that also incremental innovations, if they are carried out repeatedly over a longer period of time, can make a decisive contribution to the further development of organizations. But this brings us to a completely different project. Next slide. With the name Future of Work. This project is what we call a real-life lab. And its mission is how mobile work forms can be implemented in the Austrian central administration. As I said, the project takes the form of a real-life lab, which is an experimental space in which scientific and technological partners work together with public employees, using innovative practices and products in order to develop a working model which fits the needs of employees and the organizations. And another project I can show you as an example is the project on digital public administration and ethics. So some of the project goals are to define ethical standards for the use of digital technologies in the Austrian federal administration. We use it as a reflection framework for the use of digital technologies, and also for creating standards for the training and continuing education. So these two projects, next slide, try to anticipate future developments, to steer the way into the future of public administration. Therefore, I've classified these projects under anticipatory innovation. And one more example of the projects we're executing just right now, that is greening commutes and duty travels. So the project goals are to avoid duty travels and commutes wherever possible, if they're really necessary, to shift to environmentally friendly means of transportations. And if you have to use individual transport, to improve it with e-mobility, bicycle, scooters, etc. So the project outcomes are 8, quite a lot of legal measures, some soft law measures, and best practices. So next slide. And it will now not come as a surprise for you that I mapped this project as mission-oriented. So how can I summarize my presentation? We do use the OECD model to map projects as a reflection framework for workshops and for training. And it helps us a lot in different ways, but we do not really use it as a strategic framework by now. Maybe this lies in the future. So this was my input. Thanks for listening. And back to you, Angela, and I'm open for questions, of course.
Thank you very much, Michael. Super interesting, and interesting to see the work mapped onto the facets model as well. Next, I want to shift to Sweden and hear a bit about what is going on there at the local level in Lund. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Emily Weiss. The floor is yours, Emily.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, hello, everyone, and thanks for allowing me to participate in this session and tell a little bit about the story of how Future by Lund has used the Innovation Facets model and a portfolio approach as part of an approach for tracking innovation ecosystems activities, innovation activities. Future by Lund, I am an action researcher based at Lund University in the south of Sweden, and I have followed the Future by Lund innovation platform since 2019. Future by Lund is one of 6 innovation platforms in Sweden, part of a Vinnova, Sweden's innovation agency, a Vinnova program for innovation platforms fostering local effects and scalable solutions for sustainable cities. They've been at work since 2013. Next slide, please. As compared to the previous presentations and the other 5 innovation platforms in Sweden, Future by Lund has chosen to take an approach not only working with innovation within the municipal organization, but also working with external actors across Lund, across the municipality, companies, Lund University, research institutes, to foster innovation for sustainable solutions, realizing that the majority of societal challenges cannot be solved by the municipal organization alone, but require the action of multiple actors. So instead of starting from the inside and working out, Future by Lund has chosen to start from the right side, working from the outside, working in, and fostering the collective, fostering some kind of sense-making processes and developing innovative solutions from the collective, working from innovation networks and ecosystems. I'm going to highlight that we work with a zone model, which has some color coding, and I will get back to that. So these colors represent a way of thinking, a mindset about innovation processes. Next slide, please. But in working with these kind of complex innovation, where innovation comes from multiple actors across multiple sectors and multiple systems in terms of mobility or digitalization, different types of innovation portfolios, there are a number of questions that emerge from the innovation platform perspective. How do they work with initiating these processes? How do they follow the development of these innovation processes over time? And where and when do they kind of interject with certain investments or try to mobilize other investments from other actors over time? There was a need for building strategic competence for working with this, working with partners and scaling innovative solutions, and thinking about these different activities and projects in terms of portfolios of activities and projects that fit together. It's not just one set of projects for one organization, but how do you see an overview of all of these activities acting in concert with each other? And from the action researcher perspective, which is my role, how do we demonstrate the value of working in this way and show the results of the collective? Next slide, please. So Future by Lund works with a particular model called the zone model, kind of demonstrating different types or zones of innovation processes. In the yellow zone, it's an unclear mandate. It's a more ideation phase, an experimentation phase of a process, which requires a lot of syncing with other people. It's based on relations and understanding. After a while, one may develop particular ideas and form partnerships and consortia to share a mandate about achieving certain particular results. Over time, that may develop into a more clear mandate for a single organization who would take decisions on funding and scaling. And these types of different innovation processes, they move back and forth over time. And Future by Lund works very much in the yellow and green zones. Their role is to work with other partners to kind of consolidate ideas and to form consortia and to move those ideas forward in innovation processes. This model was then, we were introduced to the Innovation Facets model in 2020, I believe, was the first exposure to the Innovation Facets model. And next slide, please. And Future by Lund started to think about, oh, it's interesting that this vocabulary, this international vocabulary about different approaches to innovation, it can in fact be overlaid with the zone model. So this is how Future by Lund has interpreted and translated both models, both the Innovation Facets model and the zone model, into thinking of, and to discussing with all these external organizations that Future by Lund works with in the whole ecosystem, what types of activities or projects are going on in the different zones? How can we move these projects and activities forward? Not only snapshots in time, but using this as we call it our playing field. How do we move one project from one zone to another? What's the next step in being able to scale these ideas and solutions over time? Next slide, please. And when we think about these things, these activities and different innovation projects in terms of a portfolio of activities and multiple portfolios of activities. In the portfolio of mobility, there will be multiple projects led by multiple organizations that together form, provide input into developing a new electric road, for instance. And why does Future by Lund take a portfolio approach? It's in essence a tool or an approach to provide a holistic view for all of the stakeholders involved in the ecosystem. What's going on? How do they play a part into a broader system change? It also enables the identification of gaps or opportunities. Where are we not present? Where are we not doing something? Is there something coming up? Is there a challenge coming up where nobody is active right now? Is there something we should do? Is there something we can do to move things forward? It also is an approach to track the accumulated set of projects over time. What is coming out of this set of projects? And the model that we've working with developing this innovation ecosystem portfolio tracking, it also is an approach to visualize the strength of the whole ecosystem and all of the assets and the results that they are achieving. So the final slide is the Lund model for innovation ecosystem portfolio tracking, where the four parts to the models, the four parts to this overall model, and the innovation facets model with the zones is one part of the model. After you scope what ecosystem we're talking about, we use the innovation facets and zone models to map up the different activities and projects and to track their relationship with each other over time. And then we use a couple of other models to visualize this and highlight system events, and use a data mining tool to be able to visualize this, both the actors involved, how that dynamically changes over time, and how the investments change over time in the activities. So one piece of the puzzle, and we are very happy to be able to implement and develop this together with OPSI, how this can be used in terms of innovation governance. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Emily. Really interesting perspectives from all panelists today. We've got some really interesting questions coming in as well. And I think, one question that I think all of you could probably speak to is this question. I'm going to combine a couple of them because for the sake of time. One of them was about how you embed innovative projects into regulatory frameworks, typical of public administration reform process. And there was another question about measuring success and measuring outcomes in doing a bit of evaluation of not only the innovations themselves, but of the processes and the practices that you're using. So I'm going to combine that question and ask each of you, and you can feel free to answer either part of it, but how have you been successful in embedding innovation projects and innovative efforts, in particular, beyond maybe a pilot phase? And then how do you measure success and evaluate your efforts? So maybe first we can hear from Michael, and then Emily, and then Tejun.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the questions. So to the question, to the connects to the regulatory framework, there is no special answer for me. It goes quite naturally. There is the project, real people from the ministry participate, and then you have recommendations, and then you try to translate that to legal measures, for example. And another question was if these were real projects. Yes, these are real projects. And the third aspect was about measuring. Of course, you can measure the number of CAF implementations. You can measure the number of duty travels being executed in this way or that way. But I'm not that fond of measurement, or only measurement. If an organization is motivated and innovative, you should see it and feel it. And yes, that would be my short answer. Thank you.
Thanks. Emily, what do you think?
Okay, I'm going to hop directly on the measurement question, and I agree with Michael that we tend not to use the word measurement. We have put tracking, portfolio tracking, because it's all part of a longer, especially when we're talking about innovation ecosystems, it becomes very difficult to measure a whole system of actors and what they're doing. So we track the portfolio, we track the innovation activities and what's going in and out. There are certain things that we can track and in fact measure in terms of the organizations, the actors involved in these different projects, the level of investments in the different project, in terms of the different project funding that is invested in these different projects over time. And then when we see these in portfolios in terms of, okay, these projects work together, they are part of this portfolio for mobility, for instance, I'm back on that one. We can see that how different events, when we also track events, we can see how different things matter and kind of up the game. That was it changed the investment level, or this particular event, which attracted a lot of visibility, led to an investment in infrastructure or a new pilot testing. So by kind of documenting the activities in the portfolio of activities over time, it allows a perception of certain processes or events that matter and how that impacts on engagement and mobilization of different actors, and also in terms of investments. So we're using a structured way of tracking, not necessarily measuring.
Super interesting. I thought you might jump on the tracking part of the question. We've been discussing that a lot with Lund. Tejun, what do you think? How would you respond to this question?
Yeah, Korea has exercised a great leadership of making a new methodologies and methods and practices and systems and technologies of measuring impacts and influences led by the government innovation activities and programs. So actually, let me say that Korean society has made the place to create the momentum and the foundation of legalizing a data-driven public administration and evidence-based policymaking. So all of the central ministry policymakers and public managers should use data for policymaking and even policy evaluation. So this has made a great movement and fashion and ecosystem, allowing and asking and even mandating government managers and policymakers to use data for demonstrating their values, impact and services and even innovative actions. There are two types of the considerations, quantitative and qualitative. Actually, Korean societies hugely and tremendously relied on open innovation approach measuring public sector innovation and a public sector reform. Basically, think tank. We have many think tank and government-owned think tank and a private sector think tank and the research institute and even academic societies very much intensively cooperate and collaborate and interact with each other to measure government behaviors and government actions, government spending, and government decision making. So, which means that government officers every single moment the challenged by the scholars and researchers and academicians as well as experts in the government innovation area, and also. Recently, in the civil society organizations and NGO, non-governmental organizations, and developed and come up with a very nicely designed measurement indicators and frameworks and models and matrices and even research techniques. They can be applied to the measurement and understanding and monitoring and evaluation of the government innovations. Korea is very dynamic and very much intensive of making understanding about the value for money and to the tourists and the government innovation activities and programs. Basically, the Minister of the Interior and Safety in charge of government innovation, public sector reform in South Korea, annually and quarterly make tons of case studies to share knowledge, reflections, critical mindset, and even creative thinking about what kinds of government innovation necessary, relevant, and meaningful, and even sustainable to Korean society. So we have a lot of the cases. Last year, the KDI, my research group, engaged with categorizing and recontextualizing tons of Korean public sector innovation cases. At the time, we collected the analyze around 2,500 cases from public sector organizations. At the time, so we used OECD-OPSI framework, the 4 different kinds of multifaceted model, the approach. At the time, the senior civil servant had an opportunity see the OPSI model, and they had a great sense about how to apply the OECD-OPSI model into Korean context in the area of the public sector the innovation. So the next times, I would like to share a Korean technology and techniques and methodologies of measuring and taking a look at value for money in the area of public sector innovation.
Thank you very much, Taejun. And thanks to all the countries who provided examples of how the work that you've been doing with portfolio approaches has really helped you advance the work in your administrations and in your innovation ecosystems. It's really helpful to see how these approaches have advanced the work, and also how the practices that you're using, they're quite inspiring as well, because it's easy to develop a framework. It's even more difficult to put that into practice. And I'm really inspired to see the work that you've been doing on the ground. So thanks very much for these examples. There's some very interesting questions that have come up in the chat that we probably won't have time to address, in particular on evaluating the process versus the outcomes, which is a very interesting question and something that we often try to focus on as well. Unfortunately, we won't be able to answer that today. That probably needs an entire separate webinar. Before we move along to our next section, I'd like to launch a poll question for everyone. And you should see it appear on your screen. So we'd like to hear from participants today whether you agree with this statement. So I have an accurate overview of my organization's innovation portfolio. And by my organization, that can mean your government administration as a whole. It could be the units that you're working in. Do you have an accurate view? I'm very curious to know where people stand on this. I'm really interested to see that many say disagree, but not strongly disagree. So maybe they have a partial view or maybe the view is not accurate, or maybe there's something a bit lacking in that view. But it's interesting to see, and quite a few of you are also agreeing that you do have something in place. About 25% of you agree with that, and some are neutral. So maybe there might be a portfolio, but it's not well known, or maybe it's not that accurate. But it's looking like overall there's disagreement. So there's still some work for us to do, it sounds like. Okay, thanks so much. It's very interesting to kind of take the pulse of participants in the room today. So I'm going to end the poll and hand over to my colleague Piret, who is going to dive a little bit deeper into this topic with us. Over to you, Piret.
Thank you so much. And we're going to head over to the future. So what will the future of portfolios in the public sector hold? So I'm going to welcome our expert panelists from really 3 different organizations and backgrounds. So Professor Rainer Kattel from UCL, who is the Deputy Director at the IIPP, who has a very good overview about what is going on in the field of missions and also portfolios around missions. Emilia Lischke, who is the Director of Cora Foundation, and who's been really advancing also the topic of portfolio management around sustainability transitions. And Andrea Erdei from the European Commission, who is, if I may say so myself, is leading the kind of participatory and collaborative transformation of a really big organization, the European Commission, and can tell us a little bit about what's going on there. We have fabulous experts to talk about where the portfolio approaches may be going. Maybe we'll start off with Rainer, with you. Tell us a little bit about what you see, how your organization or your partner organizations are engaging with different types of innovation and how they are doing innovation portfolio approaches, how they structure their innovation approaches, for example, in terms of missions.
Yeah, thanks, Piret, and happy to be here, and great to see so many people actively discussing public sector innovation. So that's a very encouraging sign, I think. Yeah, so I think very briefly, so I think there are like 3 interesting, if you will, like trends emerging in the area that we work very closely, which is very much around mission-oriented innovation, as it were. And so I think first is that I think there's lots of experimentation around missions, so but particularly as missions as policy. So there's lots of organizations, particularly in the field of science and technology, I think, but also increasingly cities, for instance, and then even like public banks and places like that are, using the language of missions or trying to experiment around missions. And, you see the variety of missions is perhaps as large as the Heinz's ketchup. There's like 57 varieties of ketchup and pickles and missions as well. But I think there is much less thinking about whether mission-oriented policies would also need mission-oriented organizations. So I think there's a lot of thinking, or at the moment practices around the existing organizations apply missions, but I think maybe that's not as easy as it seems. You need specific capabilities, and you need to perhaps pay much more attention to the organizational setup as well. I think the second thing we already heard, I think in the case of Lund, there is increasing interest around like ecosystem orchestration, and because missions today are not really about like top-down public sector saying this is what you should do, but it's much more that galvanizing the ecosystem to walk in the same direction. And I think this is again something that I think public sector organizations are not very well equipped to do. So I think particularly engagement and stakeholder management is something that public sector organizations are quite on ease with, because of it might look corrupt or all of those things. So you don't want to be accused of favoritism and things like that. So I think there's particular skills needed to do stakeholder engagement, but at the same time I think this ecosystem orchestration for missions I think is very important and an emerging topic. And I think the third one, and I'll finish here, is because of COVID and war and inflation and this very immediate crisis, I think there is an increasing interest in developing public sector dynamic capabilities. So, the public sector is enabled to not only respond to crises, but also proactively, shape the issues around those crises. But again, I think we perhaps might need much more investment into those capabilities, whether it's through HR, whether it's through training and things like that. So if you look at a typical sort of like a mission-oriented policy, then again, organizations don't pay any attention to their own capabilities in that space. So they think, we have funding for mission-oriented projects, but actually no funding for our own capability development. And I think that's really there. So I think, most of it, I think, boils down to, yes, policy, yes, organizations much less. And I think looking at the future, we need to pay much more attention into public organizations as mission-oriented organizations and how they can actually deliver. But I think it's true for all the innovation facets that we have been talking about here today. So it's not only missions, but missions are particularly complex, I would say, because of the ecosystem orchestration aspect of that. But I stop here.
Thank you so much, Rainer. And I also make the plug for the new book that is out on how to make an entrepreneurial state, why innovation needs bureaucracy. Please do go and check it out. I find it
Thank you so much.
interesting as well is that in a kind of portfolio approach, when we look at these innovations and investments and risks that we're taking, we also need to map the capabilities to our portfolio. Can we actually deliver on the things that the portfolio that we are having in place? Emilia, over to you. I've been an admirer of Cora's work for quite some time on this space in the innovation portfolios. What is your perspective on how to manage an innovation portfolio and different types of innovations?
Thank you very much. I might start to zoom out a little bit before I answer that question specifically, just to explain the particular approach that Cora is taking to portfolios. I think it's useful to note that when we engage in portfolio design, activation, and management processes and programs, that we actually really come from the understanding of innovation as a fundamentally strategic process. And we come to that from understanding that organizations, and specifically public sector organizations, actually need to build new capabilities, like Rainer was saying, to manage innovation in different forms, to manage strategic decision-making processes, and to actually integrate knowledge to policy in new ways. And of course, there's no news that data-informed policy is key and that we need to bring in information. But the specific type of information that we are interested in bringing is actually emergent learning from the field out there. As an organization, a city, a national government is engaging with a key transformation topic and challenge, be that how do I transfer, how do I move to a sustainable and circular economy? Is this how do I build trust with citizens? Or is this about how do I tackle an aging population? How do I attract more youth to me? These are all complex topics and issues where we believe a particular type of a portfolio is needed, which we call portfolios of strategic options. And these portfolios of strategic options are actually really learning systems. And what we try to bring to portfolio approaches is this understanding that you'll leverage your portfolio as a solution finding and learning mechanism. And that you really design interventions from that question. Where am I right now in the system that I'm looking to engage in and change? And where do I need to be? Where am I not? What types of relationships, what types of stakeholder constellations, resources and partnerships do I need to attract and bring to my organization, my city, or my government, so that we start to enable ourselves and open up new ways of taking agency here. Be that then through regulations, through partnerships, or through interventions and behavioral interventions. So that's really what we try to bring to portfolio approaches. And I think in our practice, we have done this both with the private and with the development sector. We draw on a system transformation and strategic innovation framing to do that. And while this has been tested more extensively in the private sector a decade ago, with in Australia's biggest insurance companies, Suncorp and IAG, we've actually in the last couple of years been predominantly working in the development sector, and here really working multiple levels from the national scale to cities, helping them to build these new capabilities around dynamic portfolio management. And I guess I mentioned just a couple of examples here, how this has been showing up. So one of the bigger programs that we have been engaged in is called the Deep Demonstrations Program by the UNDP. And that is the one where they really actively are trying to build within their own organizations at a global scale, new capabilities to actually go into that strategic approach into innovation and to start and build policy options to reposition the UNDP and some of those complex challenges, and to use mechanisms such as sense-making, portfolio sense-making, portfolio learning, to actually bring that to government to help them solve their issues. And one of the examples here is, for example, a sustainable future of tourism portfolio that we've recently designed together with the Egypt Deep Demo team, and that has been presented at COP by the Egypt team. We've also seen government specifically, and here innovation units of governance, and that's the Thai Policy Lab, approaching us and saying, how can we turn your system transformation framework into a capability framework for our policymakers? So how can we make this relevant to the way that we do policy? What would it mean for us to change our policy life cycle? How do we integrate thinking and learning with our partners together? And how do we change the way that we approach policy making and policy design altogether, really through using portfolios as mechanisms that can supplement and can design policy initiatives. And these design initiatives would be, of course, coming literally from a sense of what is happening in those systems that policymakers are looking to engage in. So really dealing with emergent information, emergent knowledge, and providing a dynamic capability for policymakers to actually engage and respond in an anticipatory way, while still keeping in mind, their missions-led approach and, of course, their mandate. One of the more successful approaches and more interesting approaches that we've tried in the past was the Mayors for Economic Growth program, which is a 3-year program that's run by the EU that is building these capabilities for local authorities. And so here, with countries such as Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, or Armenia, we've been working with secondary cities quite closely and have designed over the course of 5 months, typically, a variety of portfolios, some of them on energy transitions, some of them on sustainability, on the vitality of cities, to actually help them also then activate those portfolios. And some of them are actively managing them now. I guess in the next year, those will become some of the first examples who have been using and working with our approach to really explore how can this emergent knowledge actually feed into new types of policies and decisions right at the city level and close to citizens.
Thank you so much, Emilia. And now heading to Andrea, who is actually also carrying out this kind of wave of change within the European Commission. How are you working with different types of innovation and portfolios in the Commission itself?
Thank you, Piret. I'm bringing in the perspective of a large innovation administration here. I work for the Research and Innovation Service of the European Commission that manages the Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Framework Program, and that has a budget of 95.5 billion for the period of 21 and 27. We also have, what we basically invest in is a lot of frontier research with the European Research Council, also enterprise-driven, disruptive innovations, closer to market, and also game-changing tech solutions, more through the European Innovation Council. And we also have in our portfolio 5 ambitious missions with a budget of approximately 10 billion earmarked until 2030. So these are very ambitious missions, very clear targets until 2030, fighting cancer, adapting to climate change, protecting the oceans, living in greener cities, and the 5th one is ensuring healthy soil and food. They are new instruments under the framework program. They were launched last year, and therefore they do come with tags attached, a little bit of a challenge in an innovation administration. So the missions are well embedded in the political priorities of the Commission. So for example, the climate mission is an integral part of the new climate adaptation strategy, or the cancer mission that supports Europe's Beating Cancer plan. In each mission is managed by the relevant policy service, so not by the research and innovation service itself. That bears the responsibility for the respective commission priority. And this was a key important step in making research and innovation integral part of the mainstream policymaking. However, it also came with attachments, meaning that when making a mission, this is making a mission management more complex and challenging, because this way, the missions are somewhat removed from this safe experimental space that otherwise would be granted under the research field. And otherwise they would be also exempt from the burdensome decision-making rules and procedures. But now under the mainstream policy responsibility, they are pretty much in the public eye, and all decision-making and related administrative procedures that the European services are obliged to follow, they apply. Horizon Europe also adopts a funding program, an innovation ecosystem view, meaning that it engages all the actors from governments, from industry, business, to scientific community, to civil society, who need to be involved to bring about transformational change. And it is all embedded in the intervention logic of the majority of transnational R&I collaborations that we fund. However, missions require that the European Commission services and member state governments are engaged hands-on in very close collaboration with the innovation ecosystem players. And this is by far the greatest challenge I see for the administrations, because we have a consultation culture. You consult the stakeholders on predefined policy proposals. You handpick what to integrate into your proposal from there on. And you don't necessarily need to further justify your options. So we are not used to co-creation with other players in the ecosystem. And these ambitious endeavors like missions require a totally new working method with the innovation ecosystem players. The missions were pretty much designed at the political levels, and rather a top-down approach that makes it more challenging now to deeply engage with the key industry or business partners or civil society actors, and to mobilize further public and private investment beyond what is already earmarked on the European funding. So this actually represents a very steep learning curve for the colleagues who are pioneering this mission approach in the existing administrative environment we have. And they have to break down the barriers as they go along, one by one, one step at a time. This is clearly a challenge, but as experimental as it is, second time round, it will be much more effectively or much more strategically done. Where I come in, since the work of public administrations is really changing radically, and the European Commission is no exception from all the challenges that governments are facing. And for the European Commission, we do not have an overarching innovation strategy or a centrally coordinated approach for the whole Commission, at least at this stage. So individual services are pretty much left to their own devices, and that gives rise to a lot of diversity across the services and to many smaller pockets of innovation that pop up here and there across the services. But managing portfolio requires much more like a strategic investment mentality as opposed to public spending mentality that we often still have. Needs system thinking, building strategic collaborations and partnership with the stakeholders, and hands-on engagement with them, as opposed to the consultation culture that is still dominant in our context. And needs high levels of flexibility and agility, whereas we have massive attempts to simplify the existing procedures that apply. So the services do what they can with what they have and what's possible at the time. And often it is only in retrospect that you can identify which concrete actions resulted in what type of action, and that resulted in what. And so it is not built by design. I do believe that there is efficiency gains to be ahead and more radical impacts if we were taking a more all Commission approach to innovation. But as Rainer already alluded to it, there's no, well, I would say investment or budget dedicated to internal capacity building and working together on what needs to change internally. We were lucky in the sense that our Director General, Jean-Éric Paquet, who arrived in 2018, had a very clear vision and the courage to embark on an organizational transformation journey and setting the ambition, whatever we can do within his sphere of influence. So what we started from a premise saying that when people feel empowered and happy in their job, you do not need to instruct them to do anything. They will find what needs to be done and will take care of it. So the key word here was trust in people. And we set also an intention is to do what we can with what we have, and we start now, and then we figure out the rest on the way. And so there were key intervention areas that was a priority for us. It was enhancing the collaboration and breaking the silos in the service, and staff engagement or staff empowerment through large-scale engagements. So initiated, for example, collaboration between the different services by only creating one budget line for the whole program. A program of close to 100 billion euros, one budget line before the whole started. Because previously there were several budget lines, all the different parts of the program had their own secured budget lines, and so they did not need to talk to each other. So by creating just one budget line, the services were automatically in a position to start talking to each other and co-creating, kind of collaborating more on defining what the program should be and how much money should be dedicated to which part or invested in which part of the program. So it was an interesting to see how this very quickly shifted. We in the organizational transformation process rely on what I would call a social technology approach, and we call this participatory leadership. It is also known as art of hosting, and we do a lot of large-scale staff engagements. So this helps us open the boxes so the people speak in their own name and not in the name of their service, not representing a position. They help structure the conversations with many people in the same room and by harnessing the collective intelligence. This is a kind of here comes everybody approach where no one can dominate and no lobbying is possible. So we map all the stakeholders, all the actors, the various levels of decision makers in the ecosystem that need to be involved in order to accelerate the transformational changes we want. And we bring them all in to make sure that the outcome of the process are owned collectively and that adequate follow-up will happen. For instance, as an illustrative example, I can share with you the way our reorganization of the service happened in 2019. That was based on redrafting the narrative for our service that was co-created with staff. And later we also co-created the vision and mission statements of the related structures that were created in the service to operationalize them. So then every single staff member in the service was asked where they want to work in the next, in the new structure. And everybody had three options. The managers had to postulate for a new desired post. And once they were selected, they were involved in the recruitment of the staff members who opted to work in that unit. So this was our big bang moment when everything exploded, and most people were quite happy to see it blow. The challenge came with the rebuilding of the networks and reestablishing the new contacts and new collaborations afterwards. And it did come with a cost of frustration when the dust kind of settled. But the doors and the windows were open by then to show that we really mean business, and it is called empowerment. Do what is needed, follow your best judgment at all times. We also introduced matrix teams as the way of collaboration, new way of collaboration in the service, where the people from across the house can dedicate part of their working time to a project or a cause they want to lead on or contribute to. I am currently leading the organizational development matrix team in the DG. DG means Directorate General in the service. So once we receive the green light from the board, which the Director General and the deputies, the project can start. So in 3 years, we have achieved to integrate an organizational development chapter in the HR strategy. And this is focusing mostly on, on simplification of procedures, new working modalities, hybrid, focus on the people and teams, organizational culture and leadership. And so it was all co-created with management and staff in a more lengthy process. So possibly an important or exciting action that is coming up in January is the Reflection Week that was requested by many services to dedicate one whole week in the service to be able to discuss the strategically important questions internally and also across silos. So this will be an opportunity to bring up questions and issues that are important for the services and really dedicate time to them that otherwise you would not have time to do. For example, team agreements in a flexible work environment, identifying negative priorities to reduce the workload, or the simplification of procedures to eliminate administrative burden. And last week, once we launched, the senior management launched the next strategic planning cycle 2025-27 with a series of staff engagements already planned and the preparations for the next incoming College of Commissioners in 2025. So the latest discussions with senior management actually confirmed the need for building anticipatory innovation capabilities or integrating foresight deeply into the policymaking process and also involving other actors across the Commission services like the Joint Research Center and the Secretariat General. So this is basically a fragile moment after 4 years in the process, now that the Director General has been reassigned. We still need to hold space for the achievements so far to strengthen and to mature, but it is there. And we believe that once you change something in the system, it will never go back to where it was before.
Excellent. But thank you so much for that. We're running a little bit on time, but I wanted to give maybe a little bit, just a quick interaction for Emilia and Rainer also to say what kind of a big bang moment you would recommend to organizations, maybe 1 minute maximum, or maybe starting with Emilia and then to Rainer as well.
Thank you, Piret. You said a big bang moment.
Big bang moment to actually start the kind of innovation portfolio approach within your organization.
Yeah, thank you. I think you should start from where you are. And that's what we call sense making or portfolio sense making. And I think literally getting an understanding of what are the things that you are doing right now, how do they relate to what your intent or what your mission or what your mandate is? And what are you noticing about those gaps? What are you noticing about the resources that you have available, capabilities, and the context specifically? And so really trying to use sense making as an opportunity to connect and understand the relationship your organization currently has with the problems that it's looking to engage in. I think from here, if you do that in a structured way, it doesn't need to be specifically the way that we do portfolio sense making. You can actually you can derive a design brief for yourself for your portfolio. And I think working with design tools in general is going to be very important for people who are getting into portfolio projects, management and design and so forth, and really working with design briefs, with action briefs that can start to build new forms of actually taking decisions about where do we want to be and how do we want to be in those places.
Yeah, and I'll just do 30 seconds, I think, just following up on Emilia. I think sense making is absolutely key, but I would also add that diversity of approaches to sense making is really important, because I think most organizations have relatively monolithic understanding of what they work on. So they are either employ economists or lawyers or planners or whatever. I think diversity in sense making is very difficult to hold in an organization, because you sort of converge around one way of understanding your problem. If you are a planner, you see a street as a traffic and so on and so forth. So I think I would very much recommend that organizations start by essentially telling everybody that, 1 day or half a day a week, you have for yourself to actually learn new approaches to sense making, and we'll sort of help you to do that. We'll find good training sources. You can come to OPSI or UCL or other places in the call and learn how to be more diverse in sense making. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Andrea, Emilia, and Rainer for the insights. And I have a final treat for everybody who has managed to stay online to actually hear about the global innovation portfolios and insights from the global trends analysis of 2022. So I have Pierre Talak, who is director of the Mohammed bin Rashid Center from the Government Innovation from UAE, online with us, who will give us an outline of the thousands of innovations that we have been looking together with UAE government and what the trends are from there. So what is the global innovation portfolio in governments?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank you personally, and of course the OPSI team, for this amazing opportunity to speak to you all about this experience and our strategic portfolios approach that we're taking. Of course, as you all know, a portfolio approach to innovation is somehow a second nature for us here in the UAE. I've just come back, literally, apologies for not even being able to log in earlier, from the UAE's annual government meeting that happens in a yearly manner. It's a gathering of 500 of UAE senior government leadership from across federal and local governments, where we just launched yesterday the agenda and our vision of the 2031 of the UAE government. You know, we are used to setting ambitious, unwavering vision and applying pressure to deliver. And of course, pressure naturally creates more innovative and more diverse responses. So this whole innovation portfolio approach that happens at all levels in the UAE, and if time allows me for a bit, I want to speak a little bit of you know, projects that we work on here in the UAE, and I will take this opportunity to explain a bit more, where we have a set of projects where we internally, you know, in the government, we have a code for it, where we talk and we say, we title them as M1 and M2s. So these are like strategic level, where we launch transformative programs, where we identify various programs across governments that has to be delivered within 6 to 12 months, that help us make significant progress. And of course, our ministers have to sign some performance contracts to commit to deliver those programs. We have a platform as the Ministry of Possibilities, where it works around mission-oriented innovation projects, attempts to solve some of the more wicked policy challenges. We're also part of the Agile Nations network, where we're also not afraid to try untested ideas as part of our chairmanship of this network for this year as the UAE. And you know, we launched even the world's first regulatory authority for digital assets. So these can sometimes come across as crazy ideas for other governments, but for the UAE, I think it's like, you know, it's our nature and how we do things. And of course, coming back to your point of the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation and the call out and our relationship with the OPSI team, and the call we're doing is, it's just to show how important for us as a government that we're pulling these different threads together in a coherent innovation portfolio to collect you know, the learning, and don't become just people who just focus on incremental change and safe bets. So this is one of the reasons we have the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation. So one of the ways that we do it is by keeping track of what is emerging from around the world. This keeps our portfolio enriched with new ideas, and this is why we have been working since 2016, actually, with OPSI on the Edge of Government initiative. And through this initiative, we do collect hundreds of innovative cases from governments around the world to showcase the best of them
at the World Government Summit that Dubai hosts here on a yearly basis in February. And of course, in a report that we publish in partnership and collaboration with the OECD. A couple of months ago, we sent a call for proposals and are currently in the process now with the team of reviewing all those cases that were submitted. Even though the deadline for the submission has passed, if you have a case that all of you or any one of you in this call that think that should we know about, please submit it, please connect and submit it, whether it was through our colleagues at OPSI, or if you have you get the chance to connect with me directly. We'd love to take a look at it and potentially share it with the world, even if it's not this year, in the future, but definitely in the report that we work on it together, and the edge of government experience, where high-level decision maker, policy makers, prime ministers, and sometimes presidents attend it as an experience at the World Government Summit that will happen 13, 14, 15th of February in Dubai. So stay tuned for the next version of the report that will come out in February. And of course, encourage you all to download those reports when it comes out. It'll have an incredible number of case studies that can help inspire many different strategic portfolios. This is what I wanted to share with you today, some of the things we're doing and how the UAE government is thinking about it. And thanks again. And I'm excited to learn this from this effort with the OPSI, and would love to continue this and to share more of the UAE experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Javier. And indeed, stay tuned, because the global portfolio is emerging. From team, I learned that there is more than 4,000 different public sector innovation cases in this year's trend analysis. So do stay in tune. We will have more to share on the global portfolio. Thank you all so much who have followed the webinar, and we will of course follow up with everybody who has signed up for the webinar itself with all the materials that we shared today. And if you're interested in collaborating with us to develop public sector innovation approaches and portfolio approaches further, do get in touch with us. We are interested in having such courageous partners as the European Commission, Austria, Korea, Sweden, UAE, who are at the forefront of changes in practice. We are love to work together with such partners that help us develop these approaches further. Thank you all for joining, and hope to connect with all of you soon. Thank you.